This podcast is made possible by you, the supporters of WPLN and WNXP, Nashville Public Radio.
This is the Nashvillager Podcast. It's June 11th, 2026, and on this day in 1837, a riot broke out in the streets of Boston. It started like this. The men of a fire engine company had some drinks after responding to a call. On the walk from the pub back to the fire station, they were stopped by a funeral procession. The firemen were mostly born and raised locals and Protestants. The funeral was for an Irish person. The mourners were Catholic, and they were immigrants. Now, that fire company had a reputation for being anti-Irish. This was a place and time where being anti-immigrant meant thinking Irish Catholics were the worst thing happening to America. They were accused of stealing jobs and resources. People wanted them gone. Some say the fire company had set fire to a Catholic church prior to this day. Now, most of them let the funeral procession go by, but one of the firefighters lost his cool. He was a 19-year-old who seems to have been a real hothead. He shoved a guy or two in the funeral procession. Within moments, a handful of men from either side were fighting, but the firemen in that fight quickly realized they were outnumbered, and so they retreated to the station. That could have been the end of it, but the guy who started it with that shove wasn't ready to simmer down. Instead, he sent out a fake alarm call, ringing bells and sending messengers to other fire halls, leading them to believe there was a fire and that the Irish folks were attacking firemen. Other companies came to help. Teams of Yankee workmen joined in as well. And before long, the fighting didn't just pick back up. It intensified and blossomed into a full-fledged riot. Boston Yankees were savagely beating Irish immigrants, raiding their homes, smashing windows, shredding beds and pillows. It became all too similar to the kind of violence some of the Irish folks had moved to Boston in hopes of escaping. These were people who had lived through indiscriminate British raids in their home communities. Now they found themselves pushed out of their neighborhood center and backed against the waters of the harbor. The mayor had to call in the literal cavalry to break up the fighting. Somehow no one died, but so many people were hurt that officials decided it was too many to tally up. 14 Irishmen and 4 Protestants were arrested. The Yankees were found innocent of any wrongdoing. 3 of the Irish people were sentenced to months behind bars. I'm Nina Cardona, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee with context and backstory from Nashville Public Radio, WPLN News. That riot in Boston happened about a decade before the Irish potato famine triggered a massive wave of migration from that country to ours. So even without a truly huge influx of immigrations, there was a certain category of American looking for any excuse to take things out on immigrants. When you think about the inciting moment that started everything in that riot, people were mourning a death, one of the most universal human experiences. And that one firefighter couldn't find it in himself, even in that moment, to keep his hands to himself and let the Irish folks be. Now, right now, we are certainly in another time where tensions are rising and many immigrants are feeling scared for their safety. And there is one situation emerging in Tennessee where advocates say some of the youngest and most vulnerable immigrants could lose their lives. The Tennessee Justice Center says the state is about to announce a new policy that could end critical medical treatment for sick and disabled kids. These are children with life-threatening illnesses and disabilities. Some of them are terminal. They are getting care through a form of last resort public health insurance called the Children's Special Services Program. For decades, it has provided support for families who have no other coverage, regardless of immigration status. But starting soon, public health departments carrying out that service will have to verify a patient's immigration status as a new condition for receiving benefits. Now, this brings to mind for me a trope you sometimes see in war movies, where there's been so much violence that the filmmaker needs to remind you that the protagonists aren't just given over to fighting. They're doing this because they're good guys. So one way or another, they'll come across some kind of non-combatant from the enemy side, maybe a child or an old woman, someone in a really vulnerable state. And the soldiers will show them compassion, do something to help them. Maybe make sure they have a chance to get out before the fighting picks up again. Perhaps even render first aid and send them to a hospital. The trope works because it taps into this fundamental and generally universal idea that some collateral damage is too much, that kids always deserve help, especially kids who would die otherwise. And the stance from the Tennessee Justice Center is that making citizenship or legal residency a requirement for saving kids' lives is the equivalent to having the soldiers in that movie spit on the enemy children and walk on rather than help them out. The organization expects to file a lawsuit. But that's not easy. To have standing, they have to find a family that's willing to sign on as plaintiffs. And right now, in this age of ICE raids and people being detained during traffic stops, most of those families are terrified of doing anything that might put a target on their backs. In just a few minutes, why Japan picked Nashville as its World Cup home base. That's coming up after the newscast.
After the ice storm, many people asked WPLN's Curious Nashville, couldn't we bury our power lines and prevent storm outages? Thing is, that would be expensive.
You're looking at $1 million to $2 million per mile.
In other words, billions for an entire city like Nashville. But that's the short answer. To learn more and about how Nashville Electric Service is trying some buried lines, search for the Curious Nashville podcast.
Here's the latest from WPLN News. Relations between state lawmakers and prison officials have not always been cordial. There's been tension over the state budget, prison conditions, and safety protocols. Now that may have intensified after a surprise visit by 3 state lawmakers. Senators Tom Hatcher, Ed Jackson, and Ken Yeager showed up unannounced at the Morgan County State Prison last month. The Tennessee Lookout reports the lawmakers said they wanted to see how the prison was running after a guard was killed on duty in February. Specifically, they wanted to check the locks. That's because an inmate named Reginald Steed was able to get out of a cell. He was reportedly able to take advantage of faulty locks. He fatally stabbed a correctional officer, Dustin Pettigo. Steed was charged with first-degree murder. The locks now have temporary reinforcements. The senator said Correction Commissioner Frank Strada seemed upset they came unannounced, but that they acted within their rights as lawmakers with oversight responsibility. The Department of Correction declined to comment. A growing number of Tennessee communities are hitting pause on data center construction. Since the fall, 9 cities or counties have passed moratoriums. WPLN's Caroline Eggers analyzed the trend.
Of the 9 moratoriums on data centers, 5 were approved just in the past few weeks. The city of McMinnville passed one after a project was announced without any communication with local officials. Mayor Ryle Chastain says the city, with its many tree and flower nurseries, needs time to study potential environmental impacts.
How would that affect groundwater? How would that affect air quality? What is noise pollution and light pollution going to look like? We don't know any of those things.
Nationwide, more than 100 cities and counties have passed moratoriums on data centers. Flint, Michigan, Charlotte, North Carolina, Lexington, Kentucky, and Coffee County, Tennessee are among a dozen or so communities that passed them this week. More Tennessee communities could be added to the list. Anderson and Knox counties have proposals in the works, and in Nashville, the Planning Commission will take public input on a proposed moratorium on Thursday night. Caroline Eggers, WPLN News.
Nashville Mayor Freddie O'Connell is again suing the state over an airport authority law. During this year's legislative session, the Tennessee General Assembly passed a law that overhauls some of the airport authority boards across the state. These boards, which manage airports, are typically appointed by local governments. Under the new law, state leaders would have the say about who sits in the majority of seats. This is not the first time the legislature has sought control. In 2023, the state passed a law to overhaul Nashville's board. No other cities were implicated. Metro Legal sued, claiming it unfairly targeted Nashville. That suit was heard by the state Supreme Court earlier this year. But then the legislature passed the latest law overtaking multiple airport authorities, including Nashville. This is the latest state law being challenged by Metro. The sitting Nashville Airport Authority has opposed the change in board, which Metro Legal is arguing means the new state law is in violation of a federal law. That says that the Federal Aviation Administration cannot approve a change if the existing board objects. A local driver has been charged with vehicular homicide by intoxication after fatally striking a pedestrian last week. The victim was a 62-year-old man walking on the Woodland Street sidewalk in East Nashville. Police say the driver of a Ford Raptor pickup truck was speeding when he crossed oncoming traffic, jumped a curb, struck the man, and plowed through a fence into a church parking lot. Police say there have been 14 pedestrian deaths this year, nearly 3 times more than at the same time last year. Meanwhile, a new national report out ranks Nashville the 37th most dangerous place for pedestrians and finds that the fatality rate has grown by a third in recent years. The University of Tennessee has received a pledge for its largest ever donation. Jimmy and Dee Haslam of the prominent Haslam family, who founded the Pilot Truck Stop Company, have committed $130 million to UT. The Knoxville News Sentinel reports $100 million of that money will go to the business school, which already bears the family name. That investment will fund scholarships, hire top faculty, and create new honors program at the Haslam College of Business. The remaining $30 million will go towards hiring preeminent scholars across the university with a focus on AI, cybersecurity, and nuclear technologies.
You'll find more news anytime at WPLN.org.
There's an exciting Nashville connection to the FIFA World Cup this summer. Music City is the base camp for the Japanese men's soccer team. They'll train and stay at the 12-acre Nashville SC facility in Antioch and be here until possibly July 17th. Before they arrived, music and culture reporter Justin Barney reported on the surprising story of how that came to be.
The Japanese men's national soccer team is coming to town. The Samurai Blue have hand-selected Nashville as a place where they will eat, sleep, and train for their upcoming run at the 2026 FIFA World Cup. But the question is, are they any good? We posed that to Mike Watala, the executive director of Soccer America and the husband to WPLN CEO.
Absolutely. They play a attractive type of soccer. The Japanese always attack and they play with flair. And a lot of that has to do with that they've been emulating the Brazilian style of soccer as they've risen in the game over the last 30, 40 years. The Japanese play to win. They're not playing not to lose.
They have a couple of superstar players to cheer for, too. The big one is Captain Wataru Endo. He's a defensive midfielder who plays for Liverpool in the British Premier League. And he's very good.
Round the corner for Wataru Endo. And Endo has a goal! Oh, it's magnificent!
Injuries are unavoidable in sports, and Captain Endo is coming off of a foot injury that makes the team a bit of a wild card. But anything could happen. The big question is, can the Japanese team win the World Cup? Watala says yes.
I think Japan is the favorite among those teams who have never won it before.
Nashville is what's known as a base camp for the Japanese team. Every team had to choose one city in the Americas to call home for their run. FIFA published a list of 46 approved base camp cities for countries to choose from, and Nashville was not on that list. Japan did this bit of a daring thing by going off book and choosing Nashville. And it all may have come down to one Metro employee, Mayor Freddie O'Connell's chief of staff, Masami Tyson. She's a Japanese native, and last year, while she was in Japan for something else, she met with the Japanese Football Association, stood up, and pitched them on Nashville in Japanese.
It made a big difference that someone who is a senior official in city government is a Japanese native. So that in and of itself showed them that the relationship with Japan is super strong.
It's a relationship that goes back to the late 1960s. At the time, there was a trade war, and President Jimmy Carter went out of his way to give a special message to Japanese Prime Minister Takeda Fukuda. Masami explains what happened.
Basically, the U.S. government said, hey, if you want to sell Japanese products in the U.S., you have to manufacture them here.
The first was Toshiba. Governor Ray Blanton literally rolled a red carpet out on the tarmac of BNA. And he said,
if you decide to invest here, you could really change the history of Tennessee. Because if you, a global company, well-known brand, came here, other companies will follow.
The next governor, Lamar Alexander, went further to build that relationship. He flew to Japan 8 times in his first term as governor of Tennessee. And in his back pocket, he kept a photograph. It was the U.S. at night. Both coasts lit up with activity. Here's how Alexander relates the story.
I showed it to Mr. Kawamata, the Japanese Nissan chairman, when he asked me, where is Tennessee? And I said, right in the middle of the lights.
The selling point was location. Nissan went in. They opened the $6.6 billion factory in Smyrna. And today, Japan is the single biggest foreign investor in Tennessee.
The relationship between Japan and Nashville is as strong as any American city in the country of Japan.
When Masami Tyson gave her pitch to the Japanese Football Association, she told them about the relationship. And eventually, the team chose Nashville. They get to town on June 8th. And on that day, there's going to be an open training day. Anyone can go to Geodis Park and watch the team practice. Teresa Tolahari, VP of Marketing and Comms at Nashville SC, reminds us that the event is free and open to the public.
It's a training session on the pitch. Fans will get an opportunity to interact, and we'll have an MC there and have some, other fun things for fans.
Other than that, we don't really know what the team will be up to in the city. Maybe going to Bolton's or Broadway.
Hopefully, we'll get to show them around with some hot chicken and some Southern hospitality.
What we do know is that they will be bringing the media. Over 150 journalists are coming in from Japan to report on the Samurai Blue every day back in Japan. Samurai Blue's first game will be on June 14th, where they play a real contender, the Netherlands. And if they survive all the way to the end, they will call Nashville home until mid-July. For Nashville Public Radio, I'm Justin Barney.
We do this roundup of Nashville news every weekday. Please consider subscribing on your favorite podcasting app. And thanks so much to all of you who've left 5 stars, a thumbs up, or a review in your app of choice. That little bit of love really does tell the algorithms that more people should hear about us. And of course, everything at WPLN News is listener supported. You can make a donation at WPLN.org. And that's it for today. Thanks so much for listening. Let's make this day a good one, and we'll catch back up tomorrow.